A few weeks back I fitted a grooving blade to the little Festool cordless trim saw, and I used it to make this clamp rack extension. Worked great, but it was really a proof of concept, kind of starter to the main course, which was box joints or finger joints. This video is sponsored by Woodworkers Guild of America, by the way. More from them a little bit later on. So I've never tried box joints before. There are loads of videos about them on YouTube. Matt from Badger's Workshop has a couple of great ones, but for some reason the process just never really clicked with me, and it always seemed to be slow going to make and use the jig, which was then dedicated to one size of joint, and then you also had a honking great jig that you had to store somewhere. Anyway, I've got the little Festool table saw with a sliding table and with the grooving blade fitted and working well. Do check out the clamp rack video for the details on that, by the way. I just wanted to give box joints a try. I do want to be clear though, I'm not recommending that anybody does this. This video simply shows what I've done to achieve the joints so that you can make an informed decision before buying a costly blade, assuming that this actually works as planned. Anyway, I want to make some small project parts, boxes, little trays. They're great for keeping all the knobs and the fixings together, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity to try out some box joints. I have the excellent Snug CSC fence and adapter plate fitted to the saw miter gauge, along with their micro adjust flip stop as well, and I'm fitting a larger sacrificial or false fence to the extrusion with M5 countersunk machine screws and 2 bolts. The countersinks do need to be precise. I did a couple of these by hand at first, and as I tightened them up, the fence shifted position slightly, so it's well worth taking the time to make these on the drill press and get them accurate. I'm using the CNT 6mm grooving blade, and I wanted to start making some test cuts with 6mm thick material. So with the MDF fence locked tight against the stop and the blade height set to material thickness, I can run a 6mm cut straight through the fence. I need to fit a small peg into the kerf cut, and I've done that with a scrap of 6mm MDF just glued in. The MDF is the same thickness as the blade to within a few hundredths of a millimetre, so it's close enough for me. With a glue set, you need to offset that peg by twice the thickness of the blade, and I can do that easily by putting a couple of scraps of 6mm MDF between the end of the false fence and the stop, and then locking the fence down. I made a few test cuts on this, and you can fine-tune the fit of the joints by changing the position of the false fence, moving the peg relative to the blade, basically. With the micro adjust on the Snug's flip stop, you can be very precise with a quarter turn on the thumb wheel, equaling a fifth of a millimetre, and have it dialed in pretty nicely. One thing I did do that's worth having is to run a small section of the fingers like teeth on a comb and keep that safe somewhere, so you can use that as a jig to reset everything when you remove the false fence to get your saw back. Now, I realised in making all these tests that a large part of my confusion about finger joints stems from the fact that a lot of folks don't seem to worry about making the fingers, the teeth, whole. I think it makes for a better looking joint if the side of the box or tray has whole and not partial fingers, and I can use my test comb to mark out the height of the box that I want in whole digits, and to cut some strips of birch ply to suit. Yeah, one disadvantage of using your table saw for the notches is that you should probably plan ahead and cut the strips of material before you fit the grooving blade, but the Snug's MFT and the 10-minute workshop rail hinge do a great job, as they always do. Now, because of the way the box joints mesh together, the sides are easy to mark up and trim to length, and I'm just pairing up the 2 long sides together and the 2 short sides together with double-sided tape. Now, this is where I go off track a little, because it should be possible with a table saw to cut all 4 ends of the box sides at once by joining them together, just offset by the blade thickness, which is how I have them stacked up here and held together with double-sided tape. I've set the blade height to a fraction over the material thickness, and then I can start cutting the notches, taking it slow and steady with the workpiece securely clamped to the fence. And for the last cut, I'm going to add in a couple of scraps of material just to help prevent tear out. With one set of the ends completed, I need to split the long and short pairs up and then reassemble them the other way around and repeat the process. So that's all turned out pretty well. Now, the benefit of box joints is that, as well as looking great, they give a large gluing area, so the glue up may take a minute. So while that happens, let me tell you about this week's video sponsor. That's Woodworkers Guild of America. Woodworkers Guild of America is your online resource for woodworking instruction, ideas and information, a community where you can hone your skills and share your woodworking journey with other members along the way. Whether your focus is on making projects from sheet goods like me, or finer woodworking with hand tools in natural timbers, or anything in between, you'll find a wealth of knowledge and experience within the community. There's a vast collection of woodworking tutorials that are constantly being updated, alongside interesting articles, project ideas, relevant product reviews, and Q&A sessions with experts. I caught a great set of videos from Jimmy DeResta covering a wide range of skills, from bandsaw lettering to making an heirloom quality toolbox complete with project plans, and one short video demonstrating a really simple but effective technique to avoid getting chip out when trimming back a veneered board. I used to be a professional photographer before I turned to the splintery side of things, so I was really interested to see videos on how to photograph your work as well, a really important part of the process that's often overlooked until after you've sold or gifted the box you've made or the bowl that you've turned. And whichever aspect of woodworking you focus on, you'll find plenty of inspiration at Woodworkers Guild of America. The first 1,000 people using the link in the description to join the community will receive a year's premium membership at just $1.49. That offer is valid for new members only, by the way. I can't really say fairer than that, but I can say thanks so much to Woodworkers Guild of America for extending that offer to all viewers and for helping me out by sponsoring this video. So this isn't too bad. I've made a couple of mistakes on this, which I need to fess up to, having banged on about preferring whole finger joints. I got the height of the material slightly wrong. It's been a while since I used a track saw, to be honest, ever since I had the table saw, and I allowed for twice the blade kerf, so I've got a little 2mm extra on there, which I'll cut off. I'll just trim that back on the table saw. And the other thing is, I got the height of the blade wrong. When I set the blade height, I used a little offcut of 12mm and made the blade fractionally higher than that. It's not an offcut of the 12mm material that I'm actually using. It's from a different sheet. So we've got a little bit more knuckle showing here than I'd like. So I'll trim that off with the table saw as well, just get that a little bit closer to the sides, because there's about 1 millimeter there, and that's just a little bit too much to sand off without affecting the surface veneers, I think. So I'll do that now. I've changed the blade in the table saw for a nice 42 tooth brand new blade from my friends at Trend. They also do a range of ripping blades. I've got a 16 and 24 tooth blade for the Festool saw as well. That's 1,000 times better than it was, and much more sandable. Now I could just cut a base to fit within the box nice and snug and pin it through the sides, but I picked up a smaller 6mm rebating bit recently and I thought I'd give that a try. Again, I've done a couple of tests and I have it set up so that the rebate I cut in the upright sides of the box should match the ones I cut in the flat base. I guess we'll find out. So that's the sides done and looking pretty good. I need to square up the corners, then I can measure and cut the base to fit and rebate those edges. Alright, so moment of truth. I've cleaned up, there's a little bit of tear out on the cross grain edges on the inside. So I've just cleaned those up a little bit with a bit of hand sanding. Let's see how this goes. The temptation with this is just to always whack it home, because if you do that, you risk splitting the joints. So you want, needs to be snug without being tight. There we go. There it is. Snug, but not tight. Right, let's get some glue on that. Get a bit of weight on it. Leave that to set off fully, then we can get it sanded up and maybe a bit of finish on it. Okay, sanding down. I wouldn't normally put a finish on a workshop box because it doesn't really matter. But the finger joints have come up really nice, and it is birch ply. So I'm just going to put a little bit of Leo's Hand-Eye Craft Conorbal wax on it. I'll link this up down below. I do like this one because it always makes birch ply end grain look particularly good. So yeah, pretty happy with that overall as my first complete box joint box. I said earlier on the reason I wanted to trim back the knuckles on the saw before I sanded them was that it's easy to round over the edges. Well, even though I did that, I managed to round over the edge, so it is really easy to, when you're sanding, just to go a little bit too heavy on that and burn your way through the top veneer. That's something you do need to watch out for. Obviously, makes no difference in a workshop box like this, and it didn't really need to finish, but it does look good. I'm really delighted with how the finger joints, the box joints have worked out. For my first complete box joint box, I'm really thrilled with that. I need to make a few more. And my standard 9mm plywood that I use, I need to put some little corners on the base of this so they stack together nicely. But of course, even though the saw's been reset, because I've got the false fence and the little comb, I can reset that really quickly and easily, and all you need to do is run a quick test before you run out some more boxes. I'll call this one done for this week. Thanks so much for taking a look. As always, if you've got any questions about the process or the box or the finish or anything else, leave them in the comments down below. Don't forget to hit subscribe on your way out, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, take care.